So I introduced myself on the first screen. And so the goal of this study is to determine, and I need to remove this section right here. There we go. That what methods therapists use to treat veterans who have PTSD commonly use horses in therapy, how they use horses, and their perceptions of the effectiveness of the methods they use. And what I need to do is change EAP. So I'm going to make a note because they need to know what EAP is in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to scramble that one out. All right. The current problem that this research study focuses on is in regards to the suicide and PTSD rates among veterans. The research component includes the response from federal agencies who are actively addressing this problem. First, the executive action prevents from President Trump, and secondly, the congressional bill, the Improve Act, that has been signed into action in 2019. Prevents is a 3-year effort to develop a comprehensive roadmap to change how the nation treats mental health and to understand suicide prevention. The Improve Act requires the Department of Veterans Affairs to award grants for a period of 3 years to eligible entities for the provision of suicide prevention services to veterans and their families. The literature review over the past 5 years revealed only 5 studies regarding the effectiveness of EAP on veteran clients with EAP. Multiple methodologies, treatment measures, and frequencies have been used. The methodology of this study involved licensed mental health providers who are certified by the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association, or AGALA, to provide mental health to veterans using EAP. Analysis of qualitative and quantitative responses were studied, and a practice profile was compiled from the collective responses. Combat veterans are vulnerable population due to their continuous unrelenting exposure to trauma suffered in combat. Concern for the well-being of combat veterans has become a national topic of concern. The suicide rate plaguing the combat veteran population has been tracked since 2005. According to the 2019 National Veterans Suicide Prevention Annual Report, between 2008 and 2017, the number of veteran suicides exceeded 6,000 per year and is not diminished since 2005. In 2017, the suicide rate for veterans was 1.5 times the rate for non-veteran adults. As of 2018, an estimated 23 million veterans experience PTSD annually. Per the veteran population projection model, more veterans will be out in society than ever before in American history, surpassing 20 million. As a result of the increase in number of veteran suicides and PTSD, the federal government created 2 calls to action. In March 2019, President Trump signed an executive order for the president's roadmap to empower veterans and end the national tragedy of suicide, also called PREVENT. In December 2019, Congressman Bars, who's a Republican out of Kentucky, his amendment to the Improve Act adopted equine assisted therapy to H.R. 3495 to diversify treatment options for the veteran population. The status quo has been to refer the affected or the afflicted veteran patients to the VA for exposure therapy, repeated exposure to traumatic thoughts, emotions, or memories in a safe environment, or cognitive processing, or eye therapy, eye movement desensitization, or pharmacological therapies, for example. So studies that have been conducted showing significant brain scan changes associated with PTSD, which we'll get to a little bit later. Therapy with dogs and horses has demonstrated efficacy in restoring pathways in the brain that were lost due to trauma. So the review of literature published from 2015 to 2020, focusing on equine-assisted psychotherapy on veterans with PTSD, revealed 5 studies that met that criteria. Comparing the outcome measures amongst the 5 studies, 13 different psychometric outcome measures were used. Comparing treatments between the 5 studies, Arnin's study in 2020 was the only one that included a follow-up of 3 months after the last session. Regarding control groups, Burton and McGrath were the only 2 who had control groups. Regarding intervention style, Arnin was the only study that used EAP alone. The other 4 used talk therapy plus EAP. All 5 studies used different equine-assisted intervention schedules and number of veterans per intervention, such as groups of 2, 4, or only individuals. Variations in intervention frequencies range from 1 day with multiple sessions during the 1-day intervention versus 1 intervention per week for 12 weeks. Session length varied from 1 hour to 3 hours. Comparing the results of the 5 studies, all 5 studies reported that the veterans approved of EAP. Sample sizes varied from 4 veterans to 50. Ferrulio's 2016 study compared a 1-day group and a 2-day group of 4 veterans each, but the chi-square results were not statistically significant between the 2 groups. Burton, on the other hand, his study in 2019 had a sample of 21 and reported that the intervention group had significant reduction in PTSD symptoms. However, the outcome measures and cortisol results were not statistically significant. Wharton, in 2019, his study had a sample size of 27. The results showed improved statistically significant outcome measure scores, including the PTSD checklist, the trauma-related guilt inventory, and the Working Alliance inventory and the human animal bond scale. The PCL is the PTSD evaluation tool of choice for the Department of Veterans Affairs for diagnosing PTSD. Arnin's study results revealed decreased PTSD and depressive symptoms using the CAPS-5 and AMD. PCL5, BDI, and ESQ measures were not statistically significant. In addition, the 3-month follow-up revealed that the EAP benefits did not persist for 4 veterans. Those veterans, in fact, their PTSD symptomology worsened. McGrath's study paired t-test results showed a significant reduction in PTSD symptoms using the outcome measure chronic illness therapy well-being scores. Wharton's study was the only study that included an example of how the horses were involved with the intervention group. Review of the existing literature since 2015 revealed different equine therapy frameworks, such as the EGALA that uses groundwork only, or groundwork plus riding as Path International practices, or the choice was made to study the EGALA organization because they are the only formal equine-assisted psychotherapy organization that has an additional certification designation for military services. Currently, there are 42 services designated EAP practices and 133 individual military services certified licensed mental health practitioners across the United States. A Qualtrics survey was the primary tool to gather information from EAP certified licensed mental health practitioners. Review the existing literature since 2015 facilitated the development of the survey questions as well as input from Dr. Berger. Once the survey was drafted, the survey was submitted to the IRB as part of the application to conduct the research. Following the IRB approval, further review was coordinated with the EGALA Research Director and the EGALA Director of Military Services. Volunteer licensed mental health practitioners were recruited through emails listed on the EGALA website, the EGALA Journal, and Facebook social media. The survey link was emailed to those who volunteered that included a consent form that had to be affirmed before they could access the survey itself. The survey remained accessible for 8 weeks during the November 2020 to January 2021 timeframe. Of the 133 individual licensed mental health practitioners, 31 volunteered to take the survey, which was approximately 23% of the military services designated practices, plus a few respondents who treat veterans without military services designation. After the survey was closed, I exported the responses to Excel and then into SPSS version 27. I separated qualitative data from the quantitative data. Qualitative data was used to identify common themes. I initially used descriptive statistics to analyze the quantitative data, such as frequency distributions, measures of central tendency, and dispersion, to identify and quantify characteristics, compared practices, and assessed trends in practicing using EAP, the Agala model. Sorry, I'm trying to move my slide here. All right. Limitations of the study are small sample size of only 31 respondents, and the fact that the study was conducted during a pandemic where many of the facilities and practices of EAP were shut down. May have lost some facilities too due to the lack of finances, and the responses may have been affected. So the demographics of the 31 respondents included 61% who have been a licensed mental health professional for more than 11 years. To earn the AGALA certification for a licensed mental health practitioner, also known as a facilitator in the AGALA organization, takes about 2 years to achieve and includes 6,000 hours or 3 years of full-time work with hands-on experience with horses. Must complete also a minimum of 100 hours of continuing education in the equine profession. 40 of those hours must have been completed in the last 2 years. And the continuing education topics for the EGALA certification include groundwork experience, horse psychology knowledge, reading horse body language, nonverbal communication. And so 70% of the respondents have been EGALA certified for 6 years or more. The military services designated EGALA licensed mental health practitioners are required to complete an additional 30 hours of cultural training, whether it's provided through the military with military contracts or with EGALA specific military cultural training, and 80 clinical experience hours, including on-the-job experience, volunteer work with military populations, etc. 74% of the respondents were certified military services designated. So there were 4 qualitative type questions out of 28 questions. 100% of the respondents reported using some active progress of their veteran client. 10% used the satisfaction of life scale, and 3% used acceptance of action questionnaire. 100% of the respondents mentioned self-report benefits from clients or their family and the friends as being helpful in determining whether EAP was effective. Qualitative questions revealed that veterans prefer more direct instructions, avoiding excessive talk therapy, being outside instead of in a clinic setting with 4 walls. The question regarding the least effective modalities when using the EAP intervention for veterans was answered consistently among the 31 respondents. With veterans, the more direct instructions for activities work better than having an abstract or open directive. In regard to why the licensed mental health practitioners think EAP works with veterans suffering from PTSD, 90% of the respondents mentioned the extreme sensitivity of the horse as a prey animal and the hypervigilance of their veteran clients help get veterans out of their head, plus the size of the animal, the lack of talk therapy, or having to speak about their issues. The belief that horses and veterans share very similar characteristics and the trust that is more easily adopted by the veteran toward their horse. So in regard to why licensed mental health practitioners think EAP works with veterans suffering from PTSD, 95% of respondents again shared similar themology that the horse, being a very sensitive prey animal, mirrors the veteran client's hypervigilant attitude and actions. Statements such as immediate emotional feedback, they mention the fact that EAP is an experiential-based therapy which helps the client to learn about their problems and work through them outdoors in nature with horses, opens up space and mind active, not just talk, metaphor creation for real life situations and experiences, and allows clients to work on issues that are presenting when they show up. It is also a solution-focused therapy. So EAP is effective. Is it effective? I didn't ask this question outright because I believe that since they had gone through the rigors of certification, they must believe it's effective to some degree. So questions that were related to the efficacy of EAP include questions such as whether they thought EAP was a life-saving intervention, effective long-term, effective as standalone, or if it's a bridge to care. 84% of the respondents agreed and strongly agreed that EAP is a life-saving intervention. 93% agreed and strongly agreed that EAP is effective long-term. The question regarding EAP, is it a life-saving intervention? Is it effective long-term? Is it bridge to care? Or is effective standalone therapy? All pertain to the question, is EAP effective? I want to know if this form of therapy is, and if it's just an expensive novelty, or could it possibly work without the need for additional mental health care therapeutics? The question that EAP is considered a bridge to care had one respondent who disagreed, and perhaps that's because they thought it was long-term and a life-saving intervention. These four bars, bar charts are, these bar charts are descriptive frequencies pertaining to two questions to profile best practices with licensed mental health practitioners who treat veterans with EAP. 58% or more than half the respondents believe that the usual time to meet clients' mental health goals was 3 to 6 months. The descriptive frequency of best number of clients per session, the tallest column is 1 per session, but that's only 36%. 42% marked more than 2 clients per session, and 22% marked other. My initial hypothesis was that 1 patient per session would be best, but only 36% agreed. Why only 36? I was wondering. So one thought is that maybe the EAP is with, if they're intimidating, the horses are intimidating, that some veterans may need additional partners, or since they agreed that it's effective as a family um, therapy for dysfunction in the family. As a matter of fact, 65% of the respondents strongly agreed that family-related dysfunction treatment with EAP is effective. 51% of the respondents agreed that horses are intimidating and agreed that EAP was effective as a result. Perhaps in such instances, a client intimidated by the horse and they may need an extra person in the arena with them during the session, as I had mentioned earlier. So 72% of respondents believe that 1 to 2 hours is the best length for each session. Other choices that were offered regarding best length of each session included 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, and beyond. But the best frequency of sessions revealed that 52% meet clients 1 time per week, and 42% believe that the best frequency is variable, probably depending on the client need. The methodology in the literature review noted that all 5 of the studies met 1 time per week and revealed variation in length of session that included 1 day only of 160 minutes to 3 hours per session. The research component assessed the need for additional mental health intervention options for veterans who have been diagnosed with PTSD and a prevention of suicide among veterans. Based on the results of the research component, we have a practice profile regarding best frequency, length of time mental health goals are usually achieved, as well as an understanding for the mental health professionals why EAP is effective with veterans who suffer from PTSD. The goal of the curriculum development component is to introduce to medical professionals about the concept of EAP as an additional option for their veteran patients with PTSD, and to educate licensed mental health practitioners who use EAP with patients who are veterans and have PTSD to implement or refer to an EAP facility to obtain the best results. A curriculum can begin with an overview of post-traumatic stress disorder and the ways traumatic events physically change the brain. The next phase of the curriculum would involve the introduction and exploration of brain plasticity, where the brain changes its own wiring when stimulated repeatedly using the same pathways. The synectics teaching strategy could be used to bridge the knowledge expansion creatively using the concept of a metaphor, connecting the familiar with the unfamiliar. The addition of discussion assignments and presentations would allow students to form their own understanding of the concepts. So an example of the PTSD overview would introduce current neuroscience literature regarding 4 ways traumatic events affect the brain, leading to symptoms of PTSD and the diagnosis of PTSD. A discussion of brain regions involved would include the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus axis, and their independent and interdependent functions. So next, provide functional MRI brain scans images revealing the signature hyperactivity in the prefrontal cortex. Addressing the physical changes demonstrated in functional MRI brain scans, assignments would include presentations and discussion points about results of the brain scans and how the changes affected outward behavior and physical connections that are affected. To explore root causes, understanding how neurons in the brain can be manipulated is a place to develop knowledge and understanding how emotions and body sensations are connected. These questions would stimulate that beginning process. A metaphor used in education to help stimulate and build knowledge regarding the topic of brain plasticity and how the neurons are involved in bridging gaps that have been broken can start with the question, what do these bushes have in common with neurons of the brain? And so they would probably not get the answer right away, but what I would do was consider breaking them out into groups. And so you can see the next question sort of ties in the first question, what? And so to lead the class through a stepwise approach, building on knowledge, still focusing on neurons and how they connect ultimately emotions to physical effects. So how is the row of hedges similar to neurons in your brain? Giving the students time to reflect may break out into groups for a short period of time to discuss their thoughts. And so then I would approach them with the next question. What happens to the neuron connections when we practice something over and over? The quote, trauma is not just a time in the past, it is also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body, would be the culminating goal to understanding how neurons and brain chemicals can affect physical changes and vice versa, stimulating student thinking to create activities that would restructure neural development. For example, a discussion assignment intended to enhance the learning process for the students could include, give an example of an emotion that is felt by the body. And what are the emotional hormones released that are related to the emotion and where are they released from? Students will be able to work on assignments that will intentionally lead to a sense of accomplishment and success. Understanding that lessons learned in the student's past are different for each student. So be some variability as they approach these. So a discussion assignment will allow them to forge their own path in acquiring knowledge and understanding the concepts in their chosen methods. Another example of a curriculum strategy would include exploring major regions of the cerebral cortex. The more brain areas a student uses, the more neurons fire and the more neural networks change, and thus the more learning occurs. To develop a lesson that incorporates the whole brain would include an assignment where a student would be tasked to provide an example of an activity that would engage 4 regions of the brain. For example, teaching students about brain plasticity that uses all 4 of the regions in the brain could begin with a reading assignment or a lecture involving the sensory cortex, which is involving gathering information, and then ask the students to think about brain plasticity ideas and write out the meaning in their own words, which activates the integrative cortex near the sensory cortex and correlates with making meaning of information. Then assign students to work in pairs to develop criteria about that, which means creating to the teacher or the class, which utilizes the motor cortex area and correlates with actively testing ideas. Results of this study showed that licensed mental health providers who work with veterans using EAP in their practice believe that EAP is efficacious with veterans who suffer from PTSD. Respondents agreed that 1 to 2 hours is effective per EAP session, meaning 1 time per week. Acquiring the mental health goal is usually achieved in 3 to 6 months, and that more than one person per session is most effective. Additionally, EAP is effective long term, and practitioners believe it is a life saving intervention. To develop a curriculum about equine assisted therapy and its efficacy on veterans who suffer from PTSD would include units pertaining to the physical brain changes revealed on functional brain scans, bridging current understanding to most recent scientific findings of the physiological changes, introduce animal assisted therapy, how the presence of a trusted animal partner affects PTSD symptomology, the evidence of physical brain changes, and how to manipulate brain neurons and hypothalamus axis chemicals to improve whole body function. Explore concepts via the use of inquiry-based teaching and thinking. Synectic's teaching strategy using metaphors can increase understanding of brain anatomy and function, as well as how metaphor therapy is utilized in various forms of medical therapy. Outcome measures and activities will include reading assignments, reading frequent testing, discussion assignments, presentations, and group assignments. And so future research questions, I just put this up yesterday, and so I'm not done with it, but I have a good list there, and I'm probably going to do a resources page here, and then very quickly, here's the references.